If your legato sucks and you have no idea why, today's the day we're gonna fix that. Okay, so before we start, let's divide legato into two different parts. The first part is playing from the higher strings to the low strings, and the second part is playing from the low to the high. In other words, descending and ascending. Now we can obviously play on only one string, but we're not gonna focus on this today. So just as you saw in the lick, we're gonna start by playing from the high strings to the low ones. So there are many patterns we can play to practice this kind of legato, but we're gonna focus on a specific one. As always, the exercises I'm playing here and more exercises for legato can be found in my Patreon. So we're gonna start with a downstroke and then pull off, and then hammer the next two notes. Then we're gonna have two more pull-offs. So we have this. Now after the initial down pick, our right hand has only one job, and that's muting all the unused strings. Okay, so let's dive a bit deeper on how to cross strings. So we're going to play the pattern on the first string. And right here, when we pull off back to the last note of the pattern, this is where our fingers are at the maximum distance from the fretboard. So we're gonna utilize this distance and hammer onto the next note on the next string and start the pattern anew. This is going to be exactly the same no matter the rotation you choose or the fingering you choose. Now once we get to the second string, the technique changes a bit. So now our first finger is going to touch the strings below it in order to mute them as well. So we have our right hand muting the lower strings and our left hand muting the upper string. Now the rotation of your left hand is very, very crucial as well. If you're like me and you enjoy playing at an angle and not in a straight line with the neck, then legato is going to be a lot harder for you. When we play like this at an angle, our left hand has so much less range of motion, and this usually isn't really a problem unless when it comes to legato. So for example, if we're gonna play the pattern we just played, crossing to the lower strings is going to involve a hammer, and so on. But if we have such a short range of motion, the hammer is going to be very weak and quiet, and that's a problem because legato thrives on these hammers. So there are two solutions to this problem. Either you straighten out your hands when it comes to legato, which is what I end up doing in many scenarios. Two, you can practice hard enough and make this angle work, which I ended up doing as well, but it's going to take more time. So when it comes to legato, I naturally shift between angles to that which is more comfortable to me. So all of the hammers in a legato run are kind of like small powerhouses. So when you miss a hammer, all of your next notes are going to be just as bad up until you reach your next hammer, or until you reach a slide, which gives you a bit of juice as well. So if we get to a point where we can't hammer or we don't want to, we can always pick. Now mind you, it does break the feeling of a smooth legato by a bit, but if you have to, then you have to. Now if you don't want to pick because you still want to keep the feeling of the legato and you can't hammer, there's still another way you can achieve this, and this is by adding a right hand tap. Okay, let's get to ascending using legato. Okay, so ascending using legato. The pattern we're gonna focus on sounds like this. Full speed, it sounds like this. So we're going to pick or hammer depending on how you want to start this legato run. Then another hammer, a pull off, and two hammers. And the way we're going to cross strings here is very, very similar to the previous way. Only now we're going to cross strings using our first finger with a hammer. Okay, so let's see exactly how to cross strings when ascending. After we finish the initial pattern on the first string, so now our pinky is on the fretboard. And our first finger, the finger we're gonna use to cross on to the next string, is at the maximum distance from the fretboard. So again, we're gonna use this distance to hammer on to the next string. And a great exercise to practice these string crosses is to put an emphasis on them. So we're going to play the pattern slow and put an emphasis on these crosses, making sure that they're heard clear. And so on. Now when ascending the strings, we need to pay attention to our right hand muting as well. The second we cross from the low E string to the A string, our right hand needs to be on the low E string. And the same goes for the rest of the strings as well. Once our left hand finished playing the pattern on them and crosses on to the next string, our right hand takes over and mutes that string. So pay attention to my right hand. This takes a bit of time to get used to, but it creates a super clean and smooth sound. In no time, it's going to become second nature. So again, if you're used to playing with an angle, it's nearly impossible to get a good sound on your hummers playing this way. So you're going to have to straighten out your hand. Just for clarification, you can use both of these patterns we just learned to both ascend and descend. So now that we know how to use these patterns to cross between strings, we can use them to treble the neck as well. Not on one string, but on two strings. Or we can even stay in the same place, for example, using the first pattern we learned. So this is still a very basic concept of using legato. We have two patterns that repeat themselves, one for ascending and one for descending. We still haven't talked about incorporating slides and adding different patterns. Using legato to both ascend and descend on the same run, and more. Let me know if you'd like a lesson on that, and thanks for watching.